If there's anything more that I love in this world than ice cream, coffee, matcha, it's chisme. Girl, whenever I'm out with my friends or with my sister or any family members and we're sitting down in a brunch place or a coffee place and there's someone behind us telling the whole world their chisme, girl, I turn into Dumbo with those big ass ears because you bet I'm listening to that. So I think this is what inspired me to do this video. Reddit is a very interesting place to read very interesting stories, if you know what I mean. So without further ado, let's get into this. What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? She was my best friend of 7 years. We had literally been through it all together. I moved out of state with my now husband. She convinced us both to move back to be closer with her after about a year. We had no real ties to the state we had tried out, so we said, screw it, let's go back. She's basically family. We were also happy to be reunited. She was over almost every night for dinner. We all laughed and talked and had a blast. Best year of my life. Ooh, girl. Then slowly, she started trying to turn my husband and I against each other. Anytime we had an argument, like any couple does, of course, she would text each of us about how right we were, trying to foster animosity between the two of us. Girl, I don't know, I'm always worried of those girls that, I don't know, that are trying to get really close to you. I feel like that's a really big red flag. With me, she started talking about how she had a plan B for us. That if my husband and I couldn't make it work, I could move in with her and we'd live happy lives together. With my husband, she started talking about her infidelity. Oh my god. Girl, I can't fucking read. With my husband, she started talking about her infertility issues and how she wanted to have a kid just like him. She just needed a sperm donor. This all happened at around the same time, and my husband and I compared texts and figured it out. She wanted to take his sperm and have a baby with me. When confronted about it, she refused to admit anything and started lashing out at both of us. It got to the point where she would show up unannounced, banging on the door, demanding a place in our home. It was so terrifying and panic-inducing that we ended up having to move and change our phone numbers. I guess it's so disturbing because I never had a friend like her, only to find out that she cared about me, but in such an unhealthy and scary way. But yeah, that's my story. Husband and I are great now, TBH. No, BTW. This is why be wary of men or women that just suddenly try to meddle in your relationship. I feel they're always gonna have some, most likely, like malicious intent behind it, because it's just not normal when people just like keep meddling in your relationship and then telling you and your partner like different things and like trying to pit you against each other. I don't know, be careful out there, girl. The 24 hours before my dad died, stage 4 lung cancer, rip, que descanse en paz, he was in the ER and then the ICU, and we were unable to be with him because of hospital COVID rules. My mother, sister, and myself had been texting and calling him all day and got no response. My mother even called the hospital and spoke with one of his ICU nurses, who said he was awake and communicating fine. He passed very quickly at 3:30 a.m. the next morning. We were allowed to be at his bedside, but by then he was no longer conscious, so we said our goodbyes and he was gone. Later that morning, while my mom slept, I was calling cremation services to schedule his body for pickup at the hospital and going through his bag of belongings the hospital had returned to us. His phone was in there, and I wanted to read all our texts and take some comfort in my last words to him. I think I know where this is going. I opened his phone and all of our texts had not been read. Not mine, or my mom, and my sister's. I thought this was so odd, but figured he must have been suffering so much he couldn't find the strength. I began to scroll through his apps and noticed a chat app I'd vaguely heard of. I can't recall the name, but it essentially works like WhatsApp. I opened the app and saw a single contact with a female name. I started reading and realized my dad has been chatting with this girl hourly for the last 24 hours, and as far back as I could scroll. He was calling her princess and telling her he loved her, and she was saying she was scared for him and wanted to know what was going on, why was he in the ER, etc. I scrolled back enough to know that this was someone he was having, at the very least, an emotional affair with. Uta. My grief was completely hijacked by hurt and anger, and a week later I tracked the girl down and spoke to her via DMs and found out she was 19 years old. She was 17 when they met. He was her high school bus driver. Sorry, I need He was her high school bus driver, and she told me they had been dating for almost 2 years. My dad was 66 years old when he died and dating someone younger than his grandchildren. Someone he chose to spend his last moments with and say his last goodbyes to. I hope it made him happy, but it sure is a shitty secret to live with the rest of my life with. A secret that will forever overshadow my entire relationship with my dad with no chance to ever speak to him about it. It's the one secret I wish I'd never found out. Honestly, I don't even know what to say. Imagine your dad just passing away the night before and you find out he's been texting his, well, not really his student, but he drives his girl to school. And this man is 60. I don't know if I would tell my mom about it. Would you? I would be very curious to see if y'all would. Ooh, girl. Okay, this is from this confession subreddit. It says, I killed an elderly man in front of his wife and basically his entire family. This is gonna be interesting. Okay, forgive me for any misspellings or format. I'm trying to do this on my phone. Okay, girl. I haven't talked about this to anyone, even though it's been years, even my closest friends, minus the ones that were there. One night when I was in college, I was driving to get some liquor for a party my fraternity was supposed to throw the following night. I think I know where this is going. I was taking a street I was very familiar with to get back to my house. It was dark, but the street was lit with street lamps. I remember that I looked at my radio for a second. Just a second, not very long at all. Okay, girl. Even when I looked back up to the road, there was a man crossing. I didn't have any time to react. By the time I saw him, he had already hit the hood of my car and bounced off the side. I remember screaming and hitting the brakes, and the wash of horror of what had just happened. I'll admit I had the thought about speeding away, but I pulled over to the side and ran out of my car to check on this guy. When I got to him, his family was standing outside the restaurant he was leaving, and they were all screaming and crying. He was laying on the side of the road with blood coming out of his nose and mouth. 2 other men were standing with him trying to see if he was alright and calling 911. All I could say was, I didn't see him. I was frantic by the time it had said him what I had done. I sat on the curb across from the family and listened to their crying in agony while we waited for the paramedics to arrive. I sat there and sobbed while the paramedics took him away in an ambulance. I don't believe I've ever cried so hard and for so long. The worst part about all of it, and what still kills me today, was his wife came over to me while I was in distraught on that curb, sat next to me, placed her hand on my shoulder and said, I was married to him for almost 50 years. We had a good life. Oh shit. Then she hugged me and said that she forgave me. After everything was said and done, it was ruled that it was an accident. I was in charge of anything, and I had one of my friends pick me up from the police station. I went down a dark path the years after that. I drank heavily, dropped out of college in my senior year, and had to move back in with my mother and father because I couldn't hold on to a job. Even tried to off myself with pills. It was a hard road to recovery, which I feel I'm not fully recovered from, nor do I feel I will ever be the same. But eventually I got my life back in order. Joined up with the Navy and saw a bit of the world, and now I'm on track to go back to college and hopefully finish what I started there. It took almost a decade, but I finally started to feel almost whole again. I'm back to hanging with my friends and actually going out. So maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Oh, wow. I feel like I'd have a lot less sympathy if it was like drunk driving, but he wasn't, so... Man, those kind of split-second mistakes, those split-second anything could change your life. And that is so crazy to me. Just 1 minute you're driving, 1 minute you're trying to change the radio, and then the second you look up, that happens. I don't even know how I would deal with myself. Especially when their family was there and they saw it happen. At least the mom forgave him, but even then, I would still have such a hard time even forgiving myself. So, damn. That was dark. I snooped on the CEO's email account and got myself fired. A couple years out of college, I worked as an analyst at a pretty small private equity firm. The CEO was one of the biggest assholes I've ever met. We've all been there. He was fairly young in his 40s, a multi-millionaire, and the type of guy driven solely by money with zero business ethics. He'd do anything to get the upper hand in a deal, regardless of who it screws over. Contractors, employees, you get the deal. I even saw him seriously F over a longtime family friend of his without any remorse. Aside from my analyst role, as it was a really small business, only about 20 people in the office, and then a bunch of people working remote. I also happen to be one of the only semi-technology literate people in the company. So like many of my generation, I became the de facto millennial office computer guy too. Despite my lack of qualifications, I got put in charge of handling pretty much anything minor tech related. Setting up servers, fixing laptop issues, answering how do I convert this to PDF questions, even basic network security. They thought I was some sort of computer genius, but really I was just mostly winging it, Googling pretty much everything. You know what? That is me. Even after Googling everything, I still have no idea what I'm doing. But eventually I got legitimately pretty good at all the tech stuff. Girl, I wish that was me. They gave me bigger tasks like planning all of the computer systems for their own businesses and supervising installs. I didn't get paid extra for any of this, mind you. After a couple of years of serious bullshit working there, I was pretty worn out. I wasn't progressing. I hated working for Captain Douchebag. He treated everyone like shit. I was pulling 12 to 14-hour days with no overtime or performance bonus. Oh, hell no. And they were paying me nearly what they should have. I also hated being the tech guy and was depressed as fuck, basically living in a cubicle. Yeah, that's what corporate does to you, huh? So I decided I full on had enough of the 9 to 8 life working for assholes. Period. And I would start my own consulting business working for myself. Period. Yes. However, instead of quitting right away, I figured it would be smart to first build up my client base on the side while I was still getting a steady paycheck. So that's what I did. I launched my company and let in my first clients. As the workload increased, I slowly started spending more and more time working on my side business while at my office job. At first, I was pretty low-key about it, but eventually it was blatant. As it was a super small company, I was the only one who knew how to do a lot of important tasks and operate some key internal systems. It was easy for me to tell my boss a project was taking a whole week to complete that I actually finished in 10 minutes. Period. Pretty soon I was spending 80% of my day working on my own stuff in the office. I'd even take calls from my side business clients at my desk. Yes. While getting paid for it, period. The rest of the time I was usually digging around on Reddit or something. Of course, we had systems in place to monitor network activity, but I was the person in charge of monitoring it. This continued for a while. As my own business ramped up, I cared less and less about the office job. And since I hated waking up early, me too girl, I'm not a morning person, I began rolling into work late. At first it was only 30 minutes or so, then it progressed to an hour. When my boss didn't reprimand me, it became clear how much they needed me there. I took full advantage of this. Before long, I was arriving around noon, working for a couple hours and heading home. My coworkers weren't happy, but I helped them with all of their tech problems and they hated the company too. So they kept their mouths shut about it, period. My boss eventually said something to me about all of it at one point, but I just came in on time the next few days and then went back to coming in whenever I wanted. After more than 2 months of coming in 4 to 5 hours late, I would do the same thing, and working on my side business in full view of my asshole boss, I couldn't believe I wasn't fired yet. I deserved it and felt it was inevitable. Well, I don't know why you would get yourself fired. Doesn't that go on your record? On a hunch, I decided to do a little investigative work. As I was the tech guy, I also had full access to the company email server. So I logged into the CEO's personal email account and searched for my name. Lo and behold, there was a recent email thread between him, my direct boss, and some other team members with my name in the subject line. Obviously, I opened it. They're discussing my recent performance issues. The last email in the chain basically said, if nobody has any objections, I will be terminating him at the end of the week. 2 days from then. I wasn't surprised, but I decided there was no way I was going to let these assholes fire me. Although I didn't give a shit about the job, I didn't want to have a termination in my work history. There you go. I also wanted to keep getting paid for a while longer. Of course, I couldn't let him know I actually knew I was getting canned. So I formulated a plan to perform a little inception reverse psychology mindfuck on the CAO. The next day, one day before they planned to fire me, I requested a meeting with him to discuss my current performance. In that meeting, I sat down and he asked me what I wanted to talk about. So I told him, paraphrased, look, I know I've been a shitty employee lately. I'm sure you've noticed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been kind of getting the feeling you guys are planning to let me go soon. When I said that, the shocked look on his face was priceless. He must have thought I was psychic to work that out on my own the day before it was going to happen. I remember him just saying something like, and continued while he sat flabbergasted. I'll be honest with you. My heart isn't in this job anymore. As you know, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, which I'm sure you can relate to. I want to start my own company. However, as you're aware, I have a lot of responsibilities here nobody else can do. I then proceeded to list all of the things I did and projects I was working on. I could see it on his face when the realization sunk in how screwed he'd be if I left suddenly. So here's what I propose. You don't fire me, I don't quit. I keep working here for a month, finish my current projects, and train whoever you want on everything I'm in charge of. After a month is up, I will continue to come in once per week until it's complete. After that, if you still need me, you can pay me on an hourly project-by-project basis. Period. I love this person, yes. I intentionally mentioned the possibility of me quitting so he could feel like he won the negotiation, even though I technically had him by the balls. He paused to think about it for a minute, then said something along the lines of, "Okay, you have a deal." So not only did I get myself unfired, I actually turned the company into a paying client. During that month, I continued doing pretty much whatever I wanted since I had an expiration date, while training my replacement as promised. After the month was up, they hit me up regularly for remote task work. I charged them triple what I was earning while working there, and barely had to deal with the CEO. My client base was big enough, I dropped them for good. Period. After all that, the CEO still calls me up for advice questions nearly 3 years later. These days, I just blow him off saying, "Sorry, I'm too busy." Yes, yes. Reddit, what's your most disturbing, scary, or creepy true story? All the scary chismes. Let's see, the first comment. This one says, in 3rd grade, I had this strange short teacher named... not the short... named Mrs. Todd. She was always super nice to me in class. She'd always call on me to do the fun activities first, compliment me whenever I did something, and was generally just very positive toward. At the time, I thought she was perhaps my favorite person in the world. I remember even telling my mother about how much I loved Mrs. Todd. Anyways, one day, I sat down on my desk and opened it up to put crap in it, when shockingly, I saw that there was a Victoria's Secret magazine sitting in the pull-out drawer. What the hell? The kid sitting next to me noticed how shocked I was. I thought I was going to get in trouble, and we started talking about how I might have got there. Almost immediately, Mrs. Todd walks up and asks, "What have you got there?" I was seriously confused and told her it was sitting on my desk when I got here this morning. Well, she looks at me and tells me that the kid sitting next to me must have put it in there. She kept repeating that statement over and over again to both him and me, until I finally admitted that I guess he could have put it there. Maybe a few days after that, she approached me after class to tell me about this special field trip I could go on if I kept doing good in class. It would be a trip with just her and I to the Gulf of Mexico for the weekend. I remember being really excited about it at the time. However, suddenly she got replaced at the school, and when we got this new teacher that didn't like me as much. I was so heartbroken at the time. It wasn't until many years later that I realized how fucked up the situation was. It scares me thinking about it still. Oh my lord. Honestly, it kind of scares me how many situations of like these are still happening in schools. Like, isn't that crazy? Like, for example, my recent video. I did a video about a teacher-student relationship, and now it happens so often that it's just like, who is hiring these teachers? The thing that scares me is like, some of these teachers have nothing on their background. These teachers can have these sick fantasies and they can try doing stuff to kids. I hate that they got there in the first place because they didn't have a record of it. So I don't even know how to even prevent this. This one says, I didn't think I had anything really creepy to post about until I started reading through them and read something similar to an experience I had. It had started around my sophomore year in high school. I began getting creepy texts and phone calls, but never really thought much of them, since in those days prank calls was a common thing to do. The messages and calls would come in consistently for a few weeks, then would stop for a while. I honestly would forget they had even happened. Girl, I need to check. I need to improve my reading. I honestly would forget they had even happened until they start back up again. Around my junior year, the calls began getting creepier. They would call my house number along with my cell phone. This was around the time cell phones were starting to get popular, so while some of my older friends still had my house number, it wasn't something I would give out to people anymore. When I started dating, they began calling my then boyfriend and would tell him awful things about me, and sometimes even know where I was at the time and ask him to question my whereabouts. The hell? It caused a lot of issues between us. But again, they would stop after a while, and apart from wondering who it could be, I never thought much of them again. Fast forward to college, I stopped talking to a lot of my friends from high school, even deleted my old MySpace accounts, and cleared my friends from Facebook because I wanted to have a fresh start. I was still dating the same guy, but I really stopped having contact with most of the people I knew from high school. Halfway through my freshman year, the calls and text messages would start again. This time, even more personal details about my life. Like always, right before I considered them serious enough to report, they would stop and I would slowly forget they'd even happened. So, girl, how could you forget this would happen to you? All those constant phone calls is high school? Damn. Sophomore year, I moved out of the dorms and into an apartment with 3 girls I'd met that year before. One night, I started getting that usual text again, but this time they were threatening to Photoshop nude pictures of me to send out to people I knew. I tried ignoring them, but the texts wouldn't stop. I would block one number, and they would come in from a different number almost immediately. I got really creeped out and decided to change my number the next day. At this point, I was not sure who it could. I had become paranoid and stopped trusting anyone except my boyfriend. I isolated myself from friends and began going into a deep depression. I sometimes was sure it was so-and-so from high school, but could never come up with proof of anything. Fast forward a few months and I'm at a concert with my boyfriend. He got drunk that night and we got into a huge fight over it. I was at home with my parents that weekend and got home at around midnight. Around 2 a.m., the calls to my house phone started coming in. Yes, we still had a landline. One after another, we were getting calls from men asking for my sexual services. My God. We tried blocking calls, but like before, it was just different numbers one after another. Finally, we just unplugged the phone. The next morning, I had to explain to my parents what had been going on for years, and together we made a report and changed our landline number. Turns out, someone had put my phone number on Craigslist and listed me as a prostitute. Oh my lord. By now, I finally began realizing that my boyfriend had been the one constant during most of these incidents, and that our drunk fight that night could not have been a coincidence with my number being posted on Craigslist. It took a few tries for me to leave the relationship. He was very manipulative, and I had spent years isolating myself from friendships and only trusting him. I finally left him that summer and chose to forget all of these things had ever happened. It took me a while to be healthy enough to start dating again, but when I did, I met a wonderful guy who was now my husband. I mentioned what had happened to me before, but thankfully was emotionally distant enough from it that we just commented on how awful that had been and moved on. Last year, however, I began getting text messages again. I had a new phone, new number, new friend circle, blocked anyone associated with the ex-boyfriend, trusted the people in my life not to hand out my number to anyone, so I was scared when it started again. Thankfully, this time I had my wonderful husband with me. After it happened a few times where I would get text messages only when I was with my husband, and the text insinuated that I had been cheating on him, we decided that we weren't going to take the chance that it was a coincidence. We hoped that we weren't being followed. But the timing and content of the messages were obviously meant to cause a fight between my husband and I. We decided to make another police report, this time citing my ex-boyfriend as a suspect, and once again changed my number and limited the people who had my number even further. Since then, I am happy to say that I haven't gotten any unknown calls or messages. Detective assigned to my case attempted to contact my ex-boyfriend, but he was never able to. In any case, I think that he realized that this time I was serious about pursuing legal action against him, and he stopped. I was lucky that this was the case because technically, I did not have proof that it had been him. Anonymous harassment is actually really difficult to pursue legally for many reasons, so thankfully approaching him was enough to make it stop. When I think about this experience now, I realized how disturbed and manipulative that guy really was. I have no proof that the prank calls I got before I met him were him, but if I think about how I met him, it just all looks so planned to me now, even though it seemed like something out of a Nicholas Spark movie. I hope that those calls were a coincidence, but I really never know how far this guy went with his stalking of me. I'm just glad to be out of that relationship and to be emotionally healthy again. There must be scary as hell. Honestly, I haven't had an experience with talking. I have experience with talking. Well, apparently not, because I can't fucking read that well, apparently. I have experienced like a peeping Tom before when I was in college. And that was really scary. Actually, I had my sister with me when it happened twice, and we had to call the police. And of course, I never found the guy. Let's just say I've had really bad experiences with weird men. But then again, who doesn't? This was a few months after I had moved into my house. I had a long weekend and I was just at home, just doing some cleaning and cooking. While my food was in the oven, I decided to go for a quick shower. I was drying off when I heard the beep, 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 beep sound of my oven timer letting me know it was time to take the food out. I wrapped myself in a towel and went into the kitchen. I got the food out, started some sides going, and then went back to clean up in the bathroom and get dressed. Girl, my voice is giving out. When I walked back into the kitchen, I noticed that there was a small blood splatter on my white tiled floor. Naturally, I freaked the fuck out. Girl, same. I whipped around and walked right the fuck out of the house because my mind was instantly filled with ideas of someone breaking in and cutting their leg on the broken window glass and then hiding out somewhere in my house waiting to that R word and M word me when I least expected it. I called my then boyfriend to tell him that I thought someone was in my house / something weird had happened in my house, and he was at work and couldn't come. So I called my neighbor, told her the situation, and asked her to please come over for a while. She agreed that the blood spot was very strange, and together we grabbed knives and slowly creaked to open the doors to the extra bedrooms and closets. No one was there. At that point, I became convinced that they had to be hiding in the basement and started shitting myself because my basement is huge and scary as hell. We go down, brace for the worst, but there's nothing there but boxes and spiders. After not finding or hearing anything strange, I calmed down. My neighbor left, and I cleaned up the blood. I told my boyfriend I was fine and tried to just go about having a normal day, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't hallucinate the blood on my floor. It was really there. How the hell did it get there? Was there a bad guy somewhere close to my house? What happened? Did I have a mouse that jumped from the counter and injured itself when it hit the floor? A few hours later, I used the bathroom and noticed that I had started my period. I was really embarrassed and ashamed when I connected the dots and realized that when I squatted down to take my food out of the oven, I must have dripped a drop of blood onto the floor. You know what? It happens to the best of us. I'm just gonna say that. Like, as a woman, I know exactly how you feel. What terrifying confession has someone told you while drunk? Okay. Let's go into this. I'm very interested. Okay. Top post says, I have two. I had a housemate in college who several years later had accidentally shot and killed a friend of his in a hunting accident. He went to trial and was acquitted of all charges. Years later, he didn't tell me, but he told a woman I was intimate with that it wasn't an accident. Years ago, when I worked at the Las Vegas Hilton in the main kitchen, I had a very high-strung boss named Hussein. He was from Turkey. Girl, I know a guy also named Hussein who's from Turkey. Is that a very common name for Turkey? I guess so. We jokingly referred to him as insane because of his personality. Once, after our shift was over, he grabbed a case of beer from the supply walk-in refrigerator and invited a few of us to help ourselves. He probably had 4 or 5 himself. He then proceeded to tell us that when he lived in Turkey, he had kicked some guy's ass and came to the US to get away. My coworkers and I really didn't give it too much thought. About a month later, we came to find out that while on vacation in Mexico, Hussein had been walking back to his hotel room after drinking at a bar. He had ducked down an alley to take a piss and was caught by a policeman. He was charged and convicted of public urination. At least at the time, the US didn't have any reciprocity with Turkey, but Mexico did. Well, it turns out that what Hussein had described as kicking someone's ass turned out to be murder. He was taken back to Turkey, where we assumed that he spent the rest of his life in a Turkish prison. The movie The Midnight Express portrays what life is like there. Wow, damn. That's such a crazy coincidence though. Or, what's it called? It's such a small world. Out of all the people, out of all the restaurants, out of all the coworkers, it's him. I was at a party in 2010 where a guy was randomly yet repeatedly stabbed and badly injured. Life-altering injuries, they call it. I heard he has to shit in a bag now. I think he can still walk. In 2014, I'm at a bar drinking with a friend and some other guys that I only know in passing, when one of them, who was very drunk by that point I remember, had said some other things earlier that made me think that this guy is definitely more drunk than he should be. Starts telling the story about the party in 2010. He says that it was a case of mistaken identity, and that what he had heard was that it was in fact me that was supposed to get stabbed that day. I don't think he was lying because A, he says he was at the party and that is too easily verifiable a fact to bother lying about. B, I'm sure he was at the time friends with those types of people. C, around the same time, there was another separate situation in which someone came to a place I used to frequent asking for me by name in a way that was weird enough that people there were startled by it. He edited and said, I realized it didn't explain why someone would supposedly want to kill me. Going mostly off the guy that told me it was probably because at the time I had fallen out with a friend. It was weird. He was jealous because I was friends with another guy, the guy I was at the bar drinking with, and he was sort of getting pushed out of the friendship group. The guy I felt out with and my other friend got into a fight, and the friend I fell out with got his ass thoroughly kicked. It was embarrassing for him, and I didn't stick up for him or defend him or anything because he deserved it. He made a weird joke about having sex with with an underage girl. So I think that was part of why he was so mad at me personally. We were actually really good friends before all that. Last I heard, he moved to Jamaica and was killed, but that might not actually be true. Wow. I've had falling out with friends before, okay? Like, I was really close, girl. And this is an elementary, but still. I had a really close friend, right? You know how elementary schoolers are, we get jealous. And I stopped talking to them, but never in my life would I think that I want to kill them. Oh my god. You got some other issues other than that, girl. We'll get into the last story of today. Let's see if this is wild. Found out after his death that my great uncle was a grand wizard in the KKK. Opened the chest in his attic with photos from rallies, lynchings, and cross burnings all around some rural part of Alabama. You know what? That makes sense. We were actually horrified by the discovery and suddenly realized why he was so negative towards his black hospice nurse, who was otherwise kind-hearted and caring with him and the family. Okay, edit. Since a very large number of you want to keep calling me racist and telling me how much of a I was for burning everything. We, as in my family, I was 16 at the time and had no real say what the elders decided. We decided to burn all of it out of intense shame for what we discovered. We held prayer vigils through our local church for the people affected by this hatred. Had I been older, I might have taken some more of the damning photos and forwarded them to people who could have brought closure to victims. I made this post at great risk to remaining in my family, as they would still see this as romanticizing his action. To my family, simply speaking his name is done so at great risk to your standing on Wales remaining part of the family. So yes, I do feel like it's too late because the only thing I have is that my uncle was a member of the KKK for an unknown amount of time before 1950. My family has prided itself in being very inclusive towards other races, ethnic backgrounds. Okay. My 7th generation great-grandfather was a member of the Underground Railroad. Several of my other great aunts and uncles were vocal figureheads of the civil rights movement. They acted as anyone with that much history behind them would in a moment of shock. They destroyed. Blame them if you wish, but please stop blaming me. I didn't make any decisions, and for me it's too late to report anything because I don't have any useful information on something that happened a very long time ago for me. I do sincerely apologize to anyone who sees their chances for closure going up in flames, but I can assure you that for how many other Klansmen I saw in those photos, surely some of their families have already submitted evidence after their passing. My uncle has literally been deleted from our family history, even in such detail as to remove his gravestone so that people cannot leave flowers for him. Okay, that one was crazy. Oh my god. No, but that was one of the craziest confessions stories that I have read so far on Reddit. And I've been on Reddit for 3 years, and a lot of stuff still keeps popping up and stuff, but I'm probably gonna be thinking about some of these for a while because they're that insane. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. If you like this kind of content, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. And I might do a part 2 of this video because there's so much more on Reddit that I kind of want to get into because there's years of rabbit holes that I could get into about stories, confessions, like disturbing stuff about family members or friends. I find that so interesting. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Mwah.